Alrighty, well, hello and welcome everybody who is hopefully going to be watching this soon and rewatching this in the future. Today, I was hoping that we would get a chance to talk about Dr. Christine Jones. Got these little reading glasses on here, so I can actually hopefully see my notes today. We'll see. I actually got a chance to jot a few of these down after work, so that'll be interesting. Hopefully, some of you will have gone out and checked the video I linked last Wednesday. I believe that was a lecture on farming profitably within environmental limits or something along those lines. And yes, as I put in the title of last Wednesday's video, kind of contains the secret to building happy, healthy, humus-rich topsoil, which ultimately, if you're going to want to grow anything, try and develop any kind of crop, whether it's plant life or animal life that's harvesting it, you need to have good, happy, healthy soil down there, or it's not going to work. It all kind of starts down there, and yeah, without good, happy, healthy soil, you kind of end up with the Dust Bowl, really. So I think anybody who's getting into agriculture on any level, whether it's a home garden or, a larger farm and ranch type situation, kind of wants to avoid that whole Dust Bowl thing. So I see we've got somebody here with us. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Feel free to let me know who you are in the chat so I can direct any commentary, to you, because right now you're the only person to have a question and answer with. But I did, as I was saying, jot down a few notes that I kind of want to cover from that particular lecture that I linked. And I might even remember to go back after and put a link in there. Howdy, Eric. Put the link into that particular video in this as well, because there are some important things in there. And I think one of the things that struck me the most about that particular lecture, well, aside from the fact that she's an Australian in New Zealand, she's sharing a whole lot of interesting Canadian statistics. So obviously that gets right to my financial situation, and I know exactly how relevant these stats are to my very future. And one of the stats that she kind of gets into is gross farm production versus revenue, like take-home revenue. So basically, the size of the yield that Canadian farmers are getting and the amount that they're taking home is really quite pathetic. And according to the stats that she was sharing in that lecture, somewhere in the vicinity of 98% of what the average Canadian farmer gets for their crop at the end of the year, they end up putting back into it, or they're covering the costs of it, depending on which stage of the debt scenario they're in, for inputs and things like that. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to assume that some of that is things like tractors and mortgage payments and all of that. Whereas I kind of got the impression she's thinking it's all like nitrogen, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. And it could be. I've heard some really scary numbers for just how much it can cost to spray a field with any of those things. But wow, if you listen to this whole lecture, you kind of get the impression that that's really, really not a good idea on so many levels. Obviously, the financial level sucks because who wants to go out and spend all that money if it's unnecessary, potentially? And, the environmental damage that goes with that, the degradation, what happens to the insects, and all of those things that go along with it. It's not fantastic, but I found that listening to that particular lecture anyway, it doesn't seem like it's impossible to go from a situation where your land is really dependent on all that stuff to a situation where your land is functioning perfectly well, in fact, somewhat better and independent of all of those things. And she kind of harps on a few things that I felt were somewhat noteworthy. Like one of the ones that I felt was worth note was the grazing management, and she mentions in there about when your grazing animals are coming along and they're consuming your pasture, they are they're consuming the solar panels and therefore reducing the photosynthesis that the plant can do. There's an actual word for it. It escapes me at the moment because, of course, you get that moment. Okay, well, I'm live and my brain just left without me. But the photosynthetic capacity, there you go, of the plants, you want to make sure that you're leaving at least half of that good green leaf when your animals are done, because when you take up to half of the solar panel, your roots apparently, they keep kind of growing just fine. When you take, like, was it 75? I forget the actual percentages, but when you get up to like 90% of the solar panel part of your plant that's been removed by your livestock, apparently it's like 17 days before the roots will regrow at all, because it's got to put all of that energy into forming new leaves, really, so that it can go back to harvesting sunlight, to put the carbon in the ground and to grow. And that's just kind of what a plant does. She talks also in detail about basically what the job of a plant is, and how a lot of the fertilizers and things that we're putting on our fields kind of make for lazy plants. And it's because the plants are getting spoiled and getting lazy that they're really not having all of the trace minerals and things that we need anymore. So that I found really, really fascinating. Eric, did you get a chance to watch that video or any of the other lectures? I believe you had mentioned that you were unfamiliar with Christine Jones and her work. So I'd love to hear kind of what you were taking out of that, because again, we're very much on a similar educational journey. As the fuel alone is crazy on the pesticides and spraying in those fields, I absolutely agree. I mean, these farmers talk about it like it's no big deal, but going into it from the perspective of, I've never spent that money, so it doesn't seem like the standard way to me. And they're looking at it as, well, we've always spent that money, so compared to what we spent last year, no big deal, it's all good. It's I don't know. I don't understand the expenses of it, and I don't know if it's just because I'm cheap or whatever, but if you don't have to spend the money on something, why spend the money on something? Just that logic doesn't work for me. Yeah, you watched for a while. Okay, so yeah, I'd be, like I said, curious to see what you got out of that. Like the farm revenue thing, that was one of the biggest things I took out of that. That was just blows me away. Like, 98 cents out of every dollar goes back into making those next 2 cents. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. One thing I did take a note of here that I want to put in today's video: if you're interested in any of this stuff and you're more of a reader than a watcher, do check out amazingcarbon.com. That is her website, and she's got just a boatload of research papers all linked right off the main page there. There's a lot of really, really interesting stuff, and I've I've lost a little bit of time reading some of that stuff, but that's okay, because it's all going to be uh, time well spent in the future when I can start applying this to larger bits of land than just kind of the half acre that I'm gardening on right now. Let's see. Something else that she was going off about. Let's see, lazy plants, kind of discussed that. The job of the plant, that was one thing too. Plant root exudates to feed the ground and the soil biology. And when they're doing their job properly as plants and sucking up all that sunshine and taking in the carbon dioxide and all that stuff, where does the nitrogen for these things come from in nature if we're not going to be spraying it? Well, it comes from the soil biology. And I think most of us are familiar with clover, peas, things of that nature, and how they communicate with microbiology in the soil, and they'll trap nitrogen, airborne nitrogen, get it in the soil, get it into a form that the plants can use. But according to her theories and thoughts on everything, basically every plant can do that. It's just a matter of, there needs to be enough of those actively living in the soil, those microbes, those again, I'm forgetting the exact word for it, but the microbiology needs to be alive enough in the soil that these little ones are present that will work with all of the other plants. And it makes sense that nature would have bacteria, I guess is what it is, to do this, because she's got an answer for everything, and everything grew just fine before mankind started screwing with it and adding our synthetic fertilizers, and oh, we can do better, we can make it better, and doing what mankind does. Um, and yeah, so nature has always had a solution, and what we've been doing to try and conquer nature to produce our crops isn't necessarily working to our favor. And one thing she went off about too is diversity. But let's see, Eric thought she was saying a lot about the same as others. Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that will get repeated over these various lecturers because it's all part of the same thing. It's like, where's the beginning or end of a wedding ring? There is no beginning or end. It's just one big circle. And it's the same with soil health. And when it comes down to it, sustainable farming is all about soil health. So ultimately, a lot of these people are going to be touching on things that others will be touching on, like what she mentions about better grazing and managing your livestock so that when they go through your field, they're only taking off, no more than half of the active solar collecting leaf on your plants. It's very similar to what Dr. Gordon Hazard goes off to about his field rotation and making sure that the cattle only take so much and trying to have it so that when he comes back to his field again, that grass is even taller. And they got more grass in August than they do in April. And that was a fantastic way to ranch. And I hope with all of my heart that his son is carrying on that legacy and working that land in a similar fashion. Um, but again, when it comes to the microbiology in the soil, Dr. Christine Jones speaks on a lot of things that Chris Nichols will also go off about. And to some extent, Greg Judy goes off about it. To some extent, Ray Archuleta goes off about it. To some extent, Ray Brown goes off about it. They all kind of carry on, but of them all, I think I'm sharing her in particular because she did such a good job of explaining, especially in that lecture for those dairy producers, exactly what was so wrong with their situation. And she is one of the people that has actually been, within 100 miles of here. So there's a reasonable chance that I will get to witness a Christine Jones lecture in person and be able to ask any questions of her at that time in person. So definitely one I wanted to share. And anybody who's willing to travel all around this big old rock we've got hurling through space and take up that much of their personal time to try, excuse me, whew, how rude, to try and help other people for very little personal gain, that works for me. So more power to her. And yeah, absolutely want to get her name out there. Howdy, Babette. Nice to see you made it with us tonight. Um, I don't know. Did you get a chance to check out the lecture that I posted up there? The way I see it, too, I shared Dr. Christine Jones because with her look at healthy soil, there are a lot of gardeners from my main JT Bear channel that do come over and watch the Bear Family Farm stuff. And my hope is to not only help farmers and ranchers, but to help these gardeners who have been such an active part of my life for so many years now. Because, as I said in a previous live stream, is a farm a big garden or is a garden a little farm? I mean, really, they're kind of the same thing. We're trying to work with the soil, we're trying to work with the land to produce food and textiles and such. So I think this is really relevant to both groups of people. And that's another reason that I'm focusing on her. And eventually, Chris Nichols, yes, will also be part of the series because, yes, soil biology is a huge thing. And she does a fantastic job of explaining the relationships between the mycorrhizal fungi and the various bacteria and how the nutrient exchange happens and how the mineral exchange happens. And I just find her a very engaging speaker to listen to. Very fast though. You've got to listen fast when the Christine or Chris Nichols stuff comes up. So yeah, thinking about plant root exudates. That's a fun word to say, although a little tricky. And how they feed the soil microbes it's kind of interesting too, because one thing she mentioned in that is that those plant root exudates there we go. Second time around, I did a little better. Get carbon into the soil 5 times faster than any type of mulching or anything. So for all that I'm a huge fan of getting mulch out in my garden to prevent evaporation and things like that, because coming from the desert like I did, evaporation was a huge moisture loss. And part of why I got into aquaponics was to kind of, well, control evaporative loss from my garden. Oh, it just loves to do this with me. Do not restart now. Hopefully, we're not restarting. Yeah, but I was also under the impression that putting that good organic compost on the top there was ultimately going to add to the carbon level in my soil, and to some itsy bitsy degree, it kind of does. If I was maybe tilling it in or turning it in or whatever, that would probably impact it faster. But with what I'm learning about soil biology, that's going to activate a whole lot of opportunistic stuff that's going to consume that and put a little bit of nutrients into the soil, but long term, not have any real benefits. And part of why Christine Jones was chosen is because she discusses in specific how humus is made. And humus becomes this beautiful long-term carbon and mineral and moisture storing, we'll just call it a glob in the soil, that as long as it's not getting destroyed, it'll be there for hundreds and thousands of years to feed the plants. And if you've got good humus in your soil, then you're not going to have a lot of nutrients that would normally run down and through, go, out of access of the roots out of access of the reach of the roots of the plants. It's going to be caught up in that humus right where they can get it. And yeah, apparently it's really huge in moisture retention capacity. So that's another thing that our fields are having big problems with. The rain comes down, it rolls off, and it's no good. It's taking anything we have put on the top there, including a layer of soil. It's quite often it'll take seeds, it runs, it forms these rivers and these gullies, and they dig their trenches, and then we've got our water erosion. And it's just not good. And all of that, rushes towards the rivers, and that ends up flooding somewhere downriver. We need the rain to fall or to stay where it falls, which is something a few of the other speakers are going to cover too. And part of making that happen, in addition to having like a good mulch on top there, like I do with my lawn clippings and the peppers and such, but having good humus in the soil, because once it gets in there, something's got to hold it, or else it's going to evaporate up, or it's going to drip on down through into the aquifers. Now, there's nothing wrong with it refilling the natural reservoirs. That is absolutely a perfectly appropriate place for rainfall to go. When it is inappropriate is when it's just cruising right off the surface of your land, or it's just getting evaporated straight up, which is, like I said earlier, why I put the mulch down there. One of the other things that I found really interesting that Christine Jones and a few of the other speakers go on about was making sure you've got a decent amount of plant diversity in your field. And she mentions that one German experiment. I'm going to get the name wrong, but I want to call it the Janner experiment, where they've got lots and lots of different fields at play, and in those fields they're doing everything from a monoculture to a dual culture to massive multi-planting polycultures, and they've kind of discovered that an area that's been given, what was it, 200 kilograms per hectare. So I've never sprayed land. I don't know how that relates to actual nutrient or fertilizer applications, but when there's just one or two types of things growing in there, it'll still produce less overall than land with 8 or more types of things growing in it and no nutrient applied. Now, I am a research guy, so I am going to hunt that down eventually and get more facts directly from the horse's mouth, as it were. But I am fascinated by that, and I've always kind of been a big believer in diversity. So when we see, like, for example, last week, Dr. Jonathan Lundgren going off about how we need the plant diversity to bring in the insects and the things like that that will, help us reduce pesticide use. That's a perfect example. Yet another opportunity for diversity is the roots. Much like they are, they all look different above the soil, they all look different below the soil. Some have incredibly long tap roots, some spread out wide, some go down a few feet and then spread out wide. So when you've got all of these different types of plants growing above the soil, their green leaves are collecting sunlight from all of these different areas that might not have been captured by a singular type of, we'll go with ryegrass. Um, and when they're, growing below the soil with all those different profiles, they're reaching nutrients that maybe that monocrop wouldn't have gotten to. They're reaching moisture that, that single type of root wouldn't have gotten to. And when you add to that the relationship with mycorrhizal fungi, which are absolutely fantastic and apparently quite prevalent in soil as long as we don't add too much pee to it and they can keep on trucking, um, they basically, the mycorrhizal fungi anyway, communicates between the plants to make sure the nutrients get to where they need to go. It's actually quite quite fascinating. And yeah, good luck, Kira. Um, I think there's a lot to be said for that when you look at natural grasslands and prairie lands and the number of species that you would find in there. You'll find people that say anywhere from 50 species to 300 species in these natural grassland things. And it's like, if you've got that many different leaf types and root types, and just the plants are all demanding different things from the soil, that has got to make for some incredible, like incredibly varied nutrients that are available in those plants. And yes, I am a livestock guy at heart. My plan is to get into cattle, well, and cattle and goats and sheep and a lot actually, but cattle is the primary thing that I'm focused on right now, and going to be one of our next speakers is going to be about, well, developing more appropriate, environmentally friendly breeds of cattle, but we'll get to that too. Yeah, anyway, so because my big focus is towards grazing livestock, having that wider availability of minerals and nutrients for my livestock to consume means that they are going to have less disease issues, they're going to have stronger immune systems, they're going to, like, all the way around, they're going to be healthier because they're essentially taking their vitamins every day, and I won't have to go out as a producer and pay for those supplements because all of those trace minerals are going to be available in the grasses and the forbs and forages that my livestock are consuming. And with that in mind, I'm already looking towards various species and going, well, if you're a selective eater, I have no interest in you. Oh, you'll eat anything that can get in your mouth. Well, now we're getting somewhere. I'm looking for those kind of, well, much like myself, I am looking for an equal opportunity consumer in my livestock so that they will go out and they will evenly mow things down. And I don't think I'm going to have any huge issues with weeds or anything like that growing up because I shouldn't have too much bare soil. Not going to be applying excessive amounts of nitrogen anywhere, so shouldn't have any issues with that. All of the plants that are getting grazed should be, midlife, so fairly tender. Shouldn't be dealing with excessive proteins in my animals' stomachs that build up to ammonias that come out as, well, urinary nitrogen, basically. So, yeah, in theory, by keeping my pasture land as diverse as possible, because you all know there's no way I'm going to limit it to 8 species. I'm going to get my hands on as many different types of seeds as I can. And I'm going to be putting out there just like mad because I can. Cruise around on the quad with one of those little seed spreader things. I don't care. I will do whatever it takes to not be out there with the tractor. Um, just because I can. I'll ride a cow if that's what it takes. I don't care. At least if I'm riding a cow, I know the seeds are going to get trampled in the various places. I can just sprinkle in front of her as she goes, and she'll mow, I'll plant, and together we'll rebuild the farm. So it's all good. Betsy was a good cow. She planted a lot of alfalfa. Um, so yeah, let's see. I don't know if anybody's got any questions about any of this kind of stuff that I've been covering really quickly here, or if anybody has any questions from videos that they have seen with Dr. Christine Jones, and or if we want to get wildly off topic at this point, because, well, I've kind of covered it. There doesn't seem to be much coming up. So how's everybody doing? On that note, I realize there are a lot of homesteader channels and stuff that seem to be doing things on Wednesdays at or about this time. So it's probably not the best time for me as a scheduling a live event, but there's always rewatching, right? And really, this is the time that I have available. So if anybody wants to chat about anything garden related, farm related, pasture related, soil health related, I'm open to the questions. But otherwise, I don't know. I could probably see this wrapping up in a few minutes. Gail, welcome, welcome. Grazing livestock, small scale for personal use or large scale for resale profit. In my case, I'm assuming you mean what's my long-term plan with the livestock, and it's kind of both. The goal is to only harvest as many of the animals as we need to for financial reasons and or to fill the family's freezers, because let's face it, our two sons are married. That's family freezers, right? We have a family to feed. But yeah, I don't necessarily think we're going to be taking the direction of like a commercial cattle operation or whatever, where we are expecting to pay the entire year's outlay of cash based on income from cattle. It, it could happen in the future, but for at least the first 5, probably 10 years, I'm going to be way more interested in herd development and increasing the size and kind of fine tuning some of the characteristics in my calves so that I've got, well, the ideal beef animal. And of course, that's going to be completely relative to anybody's given climate and desires, right? So I'm looking for smaller animals. Right now, I'm looking at Highlands and Dexter cattle, which are adorable, absolutely adorable. And for example, the Dexters, some of the information that I got on them is a full-grown Dexter cow, about 750 pounds. Full-grown Dexter bull or steer, only about 1,000 pounds. So really, that's not the kind of animal that you're going to take 20 of them to market, and I got 40 grand in the bank going to pay my bills, which is what most people think of when they come to large scale, like for-profit beef operations. But based on what a lot of other homesteaders and regenerative agriculture individuals are doing, it's not inconceivable to set up a butcher shop on our property, and as we cull the herd, sell the meat that way and make a nice tidy profit. That would be ultimately much higher than if we had ever just taken them to market. But yeah, it's kind of both. Yeah, Eric, I know through the years of raising different animals that I'm going to take a loss. Well, why? What are we taking a loss in? Like, are we onto your goats, or are you getting cattle? Did I miss something? Like, taking a loss with livestock is kind of a tricky thing too, and that's one thing Gordon Hazard kind of goes off about his equipment. He's vicious. You buy the meat cheaper at the store. Well, now that's an absolute truth, and it's tragic and it's illogical, but it is absolutely true. It is cheaper to go to the grocery store and buy meat. It is. But the meat that you will get at the grocery store will be lower in iron and all of those minerals and stuff than any meat you raise on your own land, especially with your practices. So you have to stop and consider not necessarily how cheap is the meat, but what is the value of that meat. If you have to eat twice as much of something that only costs you 75 cents on the dollar, then you're really spending $1.50 on the dollar for that same nutritive value. So you're not actually ahead in that situation. You're just eating more meat for less money. But when it comes to your personal health, you're not actually moving forward. And that's a big part of why I want to raise the meat for my family. Getting back to kind of what Gail said there, the animals that I am producing are primarily to feed my family, so that I am sure that they will have the best possible nutrition that can be provided for them. You can get a whole chicken for $3, but a baby chicken costs $2.75. Well, I don't know where you're getting a whole chicken for $3, but I'm guessing it's got a big W in the front of it. And you have to consider, what are those chickens raised on? That's going to be the perfect example. Take that chick for $2.75, raise it up for the whatever 12 weeks on a grass-fed sort of diet, just naturally wandering around, hanging out with your goats. Dispatch that chicken and compare the quality of the meat to your $3 bird. Yeah, sure, you're probably going to lay out a little bit more in infrastructure, but that's going to be multi-use. You'll be able to use other chickens with that. And yeah, sure, you might lay out a little bit in feed. Again, that feed could probably be spread out over several birds, or, you might be able to use some of that feed for other livestock. But so you are going to pay more when you raise your own meat. It's absolutely true, but you are going to benefit from it way more, making it, in my opinion, a much higher value for your actual cost that goes into it. Excuse me. And this is actually one of the things that I used to fight with my parents about a lot, because my parents are cheap. I love them dearly, but my stepdad is the perfect example of this. He will go out and buy a cheap tool 20 times rather than pay 5 times as much for a good one that will last 20 times as long. And it drives me absolutely up the wall. And he's like, well, you got to save the money. You got to save the money. You got to save the money. And I'm like, yeah, but you'd be saving money by spending more money up front, because you'd stop buying these tools and you wouldn't have a shop full of dead tools. And yet, it's been, well, I'm in my mid 40s now. So we've been having this conversation for probably about 30 years, and I don't think I'm making a lot of progress. But in the end, I'm still going to hold my position of I prefer value over cheap. So there is that. Gail, one chicken can also produce up to 300 baby chickens. Yeah, I believe that, because we are getting crazy amount of eggs right now, and they don't even have a rooster in there. We got at least 2 of those girls that, given the opportunity, would be broody hens so fast. Oh, we got this one. She got kind of an eagle beak. If I reach in there for eggs and she's actually still sitting in there, I'm at risk. I'm at risk. Yeah, you just have to find a way to feed them. Well, that's exactly it. Ancestrally speaking, our livestock ate what they could find. And it's only kind of in the modern context that we go out and buy feeds. So while a lot of people say we can't go back to the old ways because we're a modern technological society, and I absolutely agree that we don't need to go back to the old ways, and technology is good. This is an example of how technology is good. There are things that we can learn from our ancestors. In my case, it's like my great grandparents, because let's see, Grandpa was born in 1910, so my great grandparents take it back to the 1800s, and they were not paying for a whole lot of feed for their animals. They would have just been wandering around. Any pigs would have been eating scraps. Any chickens would have been eating scraps. Any goats, well, probably not in my family. Sheep, that's more likely, would have been just kind of grazing around, looking for the leaves and whatever grasses that they liked. Cattle the same way. They would have been grazing around, just taking the grasses that they liked. So ideally, raising raising livestock shouldn't be much more than infrastructure. It's just how we raise them now that has changed it and makes it so much scarier. Um, and that's kind of where I'll be heading when I start with breeding cattle. Is I'm looking for animals that are going to be just, yeah, equal opportunity consumers. They're going to look at anything green like it's food, and they will be bred to be able to handle that. And with the breeds that I'm starting with, in particular, like I say, I'm looking at Dexters and Highlands. They're already good opportunistic consumers. So yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. Um, when it comes to making money with livestock, ultimately it does come down to how cheap or how affordably or how great of a value can you get for the cost of feed, right? So if you're following, say, Alan Savory's methods of holistic pasture management and planned grazing, you can get a lot more out of your fields than if you're doing just kind of a let them out in the field and wander grazing situation. So that right there is going to reduce your land cost when it comes to feeding certain numbers of animals. Now I know you're restricted because of the hot wire situation, but yeah, it does come down to really controlling what they're eating, and it's like a kid at the buffet. You got to make sure they get a little bit of everything, or they're just going to be at that ice cream and Jello 24/7. I thought mini cows were pretty cool and love to have some. Yeah, see, now that's one thing I'm really curious about is the situation of diminishing returns, right? Like as animals get smaller, they can eat more relative to the size of their frame. So that ultimately gives them the opportunity to pack a little bit more energy into their meats, and that's packed in there in the form of fats and such. And those fats give them the opportunity to go through fasts, droughts, winters, bouts without hay, lacking the best of forage, because the body is going to consume the fat before it consumes the muscle. Um, and so, yeah, with smaller livestock, you've got more opportunity to build fat and build conditioning. But I think there's probably a point where it just kind of becomes silly and they're just pets. And don't get me wrong, if I had the opportunity, I would totally get one of those mini Texas Longhorns. Have you seen those guys in the mini cattle? Freaking adorable, right up there with Highland cattle calves, which look like stuffed animals. But there is a point where, in my case anyway, I want to be able to see that return on my investment. When I slaughter a beef animal, I want it to provide a year's worth of beef for one of the family units. So I'm looking at, yeah, in a case of a Dexter, 1,000 pounds, you're looking at something like a 43% return carcass versus live weight. So okay, average 1,000 pounds, average 430 pounds. That's going to be enough beef because there's going to be chicken and pork and all that other stuff. So yeah, that's good. If I got to slaughter, say, 2 goats to get that same amount, or actually because of the ratio there, it's closer to 3, maybe even 4 large boar goats. Um, Not a bad deal because they can reproduce twice as fast, and they again eat lots compared to their size. But I'd rather slaughter 1 cow than 4 goats, because at the end of the day, you know I want to kill less things to feed more people. um Goats, just like, very similar to mutton, like to sheep, and it all kind of gets classified under mutton, and it's very much worth the try. But if you're gonna try it, go one of two distinctly different ways. Find yourself an ethnic restaurant with a people and a culture that is deeply steeped in goat, and enjoy something from their menu. Oh, I grew up in a very multicultural city, so this is happy thoughts to me. Or two, go out and get some and explore it as you would cook any other red meat in a way that suits your palate. Um, but yeah, goat's pretty good. I don't mind goat at all. I sure don't mind sheep. I don't mind lamb. I'm good with pretty much the whole wide range of livestock. And honestly, if it came right down to it, I'd eat horse if I had to. It's a nice lean meat. Yeah, I love ethnic food. I grew up in a city that was primarily East Indian and Filipino type restaurants. A lot of, standard Chinese food and Korean food, and like all of the little cultures were represented. But the ones you'd see the most of were East Indian and Filipino, and just, oh, my goodness, the way some of these people cook. I totally understand the very racist statement about how white people cooking there's no flavor. There's no flavor in white people food, which terribly racist, but whatever. I guess it's not racist because I said it, and I'm clearly pale. Anywho, yeah. So when it comes to livestock, it's all on the board, but I want to make sure that I'm getting something for the effort that goes into it. Mom was married to an Indian doctor and ate all kinds of good food. Yeah, I bet. I bet. Mm. See, now we're just getting me off on happy food memories, right? And all the curry places and some of those samosas. And I need to go back to the coast so I can binge eat for like a week and come back out here for another 51 weeks and just kind of work it off. Oh, it'd be so good. Be so good. So let's see, getting this back to Dr. Christine Jones and or soil health. When it comes to smaller animals like goats, like Dexter cattle, like sheep, you can get more of them on the land, which means more animal impact on the land, which means more biology from the animal digestive tracts in and on the land, means more of the stuff is getting consumed. It means more even and consistent growth for everything coming up. It's going to feed the biology in the soil so much better than just having, like a couple of cows wandering around doing what they want, eating this type of grass and only this type of grass. Making me want some Indian food as well. Yeah, right. Yeah, I got to go figure out how to cook duck tonight. So that's my thing. And I don't think curried duck is going to be a good place for me to start. Shox has got her dance class tonight, and I don't think she wants to come home to, hey, baby, I tried curried duck. Can you make some rice? I can cook almost any kind of meat. Can't make rice to save my life. Everybody's like, it's so easy. It's just one of this and one of that, and you put it together, and I always end up with this lumpy, clumpy. I could build houses out of the rice. It's practically a fruitcake. That's how solid rice I make gets. It's not good. It's not good. Okay, so yeah, back on topic. Anyone? Does anyone have any questions about any of this soil biology stuff? Anyone have any questions about livestocky type stuff? Anyone have any questions about why I'm trying to bang my head against the wall and do this stuff anyway? Anyone? Any questions about why the glasses are appearing more and more often? Pretty much most questions are fair game at this point. We're at 44 minutes, so as long as it's not too lewd and would be approved by Disney type censors. How many acres am I looking to get? Well, I'm looking for a minimum of 160. We call that a quarter section up here because it's basically a quarter mile by, or a half a mile by half a mile is 1/4 of the one section, which is our 1 mile by 1 mile gravel road every mile. It's great. Don't know where you are. Head north, south, east, or west on a gravel road. You'll get to a highway sooner or later. It'll have a roadside. So yeah, I would like to get at least a quarter section so that I can well, have enough land to make a difference, really. And there's not a lot of parcels out here that are being sold that are much smaller than that are anything other than well, basically just the house that used to be on that section or two sections of land. I'm finding like the last quarter section that I found was 160 acres for 65,000, which, you know, compared to a lot of land that I look at, it's a pretty good price. Compared to a lot of things that I hear, it's a screaming price. Compared to my budget, it is I just can't get that right now. But something in that neighborhood, because I could develop a decent herd size on that. I can demonstrate a lot of ideas to the local farmers and ranchers on that much land, and yeah, we've got enough room to really play. No, it's not bad for the price, right? Where I come from in BC, a good acre of land, you were looking at anywhere from 100,000 to $1 million, because right now they are just sticking grapes all up and down that valley. It used to be beautiful apple orchards and cherries and just trees and gorgeous, glorious trees and peaches the size of my head, and they're wiping it all out because it's beautiful wine country. So now, because it's wine country, yeah, 100,000 to $1 million an acre. It's stupid. It's part of why we came out here. I would like to pay no more than $500 an acre when it comes time to actually purchase a bit of land, and I would like, yeah, to be able to buy it in an unconventional means, so I don't have to go through a bank, but maybe I can work something out with the landowner and, look, I'll work the land and I'll split the profit with you until we hit your price or something. I actually recently heard of a place. It's 200 acres for 200,000. Now that's a lot more money, obviously, than I had wanted to pay, double basically the price that I had wanted to pay. But apparently, it has a monstrously huge heated shop and a very nice, fully established hydro and everything hooked up to it kind of house, fully functional. Much better state of repair than what we're currently in. So for something like that, $1,000 an acre is not an unreasonable price, I don't think. But it's just I'm going to have to negotiate just that much harder to go, well, okay, so if you let me move into your house and bring some animals onto your land, what's going to happen is when I sell off the livestock, I'll split the profit with you. I'll use my part of the profit to develop the herd. And next year, I'll have more cash to give you. One payment a year, though, you're cool with that, right? Yeah, like what are the odds I'm going to find somebody who's accepting of that kind of an agreement? It's just completely inconceivable. My mouse just died. No, mouse, don't die on me. Sorry, it's popping strange things up. I'm trying to close them out here. And hopefully that worked. Hopefully it's not going to restart. My laptop is not necessarily my best friend, but in all fairness, I abused the tar out of this sucker when I got it. I was using it for the internet install, so it was out in like -40, not including wind chill, getting snowed on, sitting in snow drifts. Yeah, this poor laptop really worked. Yeah, so land price in general, I think, is a very fluid and relative kind of concept. Make sure the land has water. All land has water if it rains. But yeah, it's pretty hard to not have water here in Manitoba. We are Canada's Minnesota, land of lakes. Yeah, I drive for like an hour to get to the big city, Brandon. And in that time, I probably pass more than 100 decent size small lakes and a couple hundred ponds and sloughs and such along the way. And yeah, any place that I look at, so far I've actually been really lucky with the places that I've been looking at and drooling over. The one before this last piece was right along the river, and it was only 40,000 for 160 acres. So obviously I was just like, I need to win the lotto right now. But yeah, in Indiana, the range for farmland is 8 to 5,000 per acre. Well, Manitoba is a very welcoming province. I'm sure if you can handle the snow, bring the family on up. But you get a bit more of a growing season down there. That doesn't really necessarily equate. I guess it all depends on what you're going to do with the land and what you have been doing with the land and what kind of profit it's made in the past, because that's kind of where people's expectations come from. Like, I assume anyway that when people are selling a farm, they think of it much like selling a business. Okay, I'd like to get at least 2 years revenue from this. I'd like to get at least 5 years revenue from this. Therefore, I need this much per acre. I'm hoping that's the way it works out. And I'm suspecting that's how it is with this really cheap land that I'm finding, which is why it is so cheap, right? Because like I said before, I need land that is this close to costing them more money to farm than they get out of it. They need to be so frustrated with that section or quarter section that they take my crazy idea and go, well, at least it's some money, and I'll be able to run with that. And on that note, I'm currently accepting prayers, wishes, and any kind of positive thoughts that the universe will send me somebody with that kind of land and that kind of a mindset, so that I can get out there and I can start practicing some of these things. And well, just yet again proving these theories. I like, because they've been proven by so many other people. It just needs to be demonstrated to local farmers and ranchers so that they will begin to act on it, because until they see it with their own two eyes on land that they've known to be trashed, they're just not going to believe it. We have some very stubborn farmers up here. Check with the county, see if there's any government farmland for sale or any farms for sale for back taxes. Farmland for sale for back taxes gets snapped up like that. Um, and it's a deep sort of I'm going to say nepotism falls into play here. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So, like, if there's some farmland that's coming up on taxes, Billy Bob's going to hear about it well before it ever makes the list, and Billy Bob will be allowed to buy it at tax price. There will be no auction because Billy Bob is special. We done went to high school together, and there's a whole lot of that going on around here, which means, yeah, I'm going to be stuck looking for desperate people to do it, but. Be nice if you found an old farmer with no family who wants to retire. Right? Right? And preferably one that would like the land to be treated properly. Doesn't want to see it go to some sort of a big industrial farm and that sort of a mindset. And, happy to teach me what they learned from their grandparents, even, because, I want to sponge that information up and just suck it all up and go, I can use that information. It would be fantastic. It would be fantastic. And there are so many elderly farmers out here. They're, even with family, their kids don't want it. Their kids don't want anything to do with farming because they see that, they only get to keep 2 cents out of every dollar. Why would they do that when they could just go get a straight salary job in the city and walk away from this farmland, blah, blah, blank, blank, and never look back? And that's even harder for me to watch than the old farmers with no family, because with no family, their heart's not being broken by it. But when their kids reject them and everything they've known, they just walk a little sadder, and I don't like that. And that's the hardest part of coming out to the country, is there's a lot of kind of sad, really lovable old people out here. And I get too attached to people, and it's not good. It's part of why I decided a long time ago I will never go into healthcare, because I cannot go to work every day and risk losing everybody I love at work. So that just doesn't work. I'm sure sooner or later something's going to happen. The universe will offer me an opportunity, and my deal with the universe, as crazy as it sounds, is I try and take care of what it puts in front of me, and I count on it to take care of me while I do so. So I kind of figure if I think I need to be working land, sooner or later, the universe is going to be going, all right, here is a stripped out mine for you to try and fix. Good luck. But I'll take it, because it's an opportunity and I'll take it because I've done the type of research. It goes, okay, so we're going to roll out the hay on here. The cows are going to trample that down. Next year, we're actually going to get some grass growth out of this. It's not going to be phenomenal, but we're going to keep working at it and we're going to keep doing it until we get some decent grassland growing here. And it's all about persistence, when it comes right down to it. So sooner or later, it'll happen. It'll happen. And who knows? I've often toyed with the idea of when we do get land, there may just have to be some sort of a open invitational YouTuber kind of meetup. Come on up to Manitoba. If you can cross the border, come visit, come hang out. We'll roast a pig, assuming I'm done at the barn. Or, one of those Dexters, again, if you're only looking at 430 pounds of beef, roasting a whole steer, I could get into a week-long barbecue, hanging out, drinking some mead, talking about livestock and gardening and farming and just YouTubing and all kinds of stuff. It would be great. Ample parking, That's the joy of acreage. There's always room for someone to park. So that's cool. Even here, we got ample parking. We just don't necessarily have room to slaughter a calf and throw it over the fire pit. I'm pretty sure the neighbors would start to ask questions, but I don't know. Not positive. Neighbor on the one side never really looks over here. And if I built a tall enough fence, and they'd probably smell the barbecue though. So yeah. All right, everybody. Well, I'm looking at 56 minutes here, give or take. And I have covered, all of the notes. I actually did remember to take notes that I have for this week. And I think we are leading up to probably something cattle related for tomorrow. Just, I'm obsessing with the Dexters and the Highlands. So to kind of share the current focus of my obsession. So yes, if you are interested in livestocky stuff, definitely check out tomorrow's video, and please check out the lecture that I will be adding at the end of that, because this particular gentleman, well, I already kind of believe what he has to say before I ever found this guy. I was already thinking these things. And B, it's just, he puts the information together really well, really entertaining South African gentleman. So yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I'll have a quick video up about that tomorrow with a link to the lecture. And I am going to thank you all for joining me. Eric, as always, thank you so much for joining in the conversation. Gail, thank you for joining in as well. Really nice to see a couple of people in there. Poor Eric was in there all by himself the first time. It was rough. But yeah, much love. And before I go, any final questions for these last couple of minutes? And I say that like I don't know there's this 45-second or 30-second delay or whatever. Let's see. Yes. I have some chicken updates I need to do as far as regular farm channel type stuff. Got a new heated chicken water thing that I figure I might show people and ask if they've had any issues with in the past. And otherwise, yeah, I need to go bugger off and learn how to cook duck breasts, because we got all those ducks and I've never cooked one before, but I told Shocks that I'd make duck for dinner. So yes, good night, everybody. Much love. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, have yourselves an absolutely fantastic night.